Ever feel like you're stuck in a rut in your food photography? You're doing the same thing every time? Well, today I'm going to share with you one of my favorite sources of inspiration, and specifically how you can change things up when it comes to color. What's shakin' bacon? I'm Joni Simon. Welcome to my studio. This is where I do food photography, and the goal here is to improve your food photography skills so you feel more confident behind the camera. And today we're going to talk about sources of inspiration, and this video is specifically inspired from my book, Picture Perfect Food, and the whole entire last chapter is all different ways that when I find myself in a rut, how I can change things up. And so I took a dose of my own medicine, took some of my very own advice, and looked at lesson 51, exploring the art world to uncover new ideas. Because one thing you might not know about me is that my undergraduate degree is actually in art history. That's what I studied in college. So I spent plenty of time in museums and reading books on art and learning about artists. And my mom is actually an artist as well. And so we nerd out, watching PBS specials on different artists, and like the Smithsonian Channel here on YouTube has a bunch of great series of different lectures. So you're a nerd when on the weekends you sit and listen to art history lectures. Now that's not what we're going to do here today. Kind of. But a number of months ago, my mom sent me a link to a special on PBS about the artist Rex Ray. And if you're not familiar with Rex Ray, you want to learn more about him, I will link that video down below. Definitely check it out. He's a fascinating person, really interesting artist in terms of, one of those folks who's really successful at navigating both the commercial art world as well as the fine art world. And, that can be a really tricky thing to navigate. But I found his work super inspiring and thought to myself, what if we use that to inspire a food photograph? And so that's what I did. So I actually picked up this book so that I could really get a good sense of more of his work, more than what I could just find on like a Google search. I really wanted to dig in. So there's, art books are such a fun addition to any book collection, but in thumbing through the pages, I was really looking for something that sort of jumped out to me and made me think of food. And so I ended up on this image right here. And now looking at this shot, I'm curious to know, what food does this make you think of? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Put it down in the comments section below. I'm super curious. For me, when I was looking at this, what I was instantly drawn to were those reds and oranges and yellows, like how they vibrated against each other. And it really made me think of those Rainier cherries that are in the grocery store right now. Those ones that have like the golden hue with the nice purpley reds on the other side. Like they've really got that variation. Same thing with peaches, apricots, I thought of those summer fruits when I looked at this image. But so having that general concept in mind, then I really spent some time studying this image. And that's definitely something you want to do anytime you're looking at artwork, is go beyond just sort of that cursory glance. Like spend some time with it, really dig into it visually. Like what makes it up? What are some of the surprising things that maybe you didn't notice when you first looked at it? Like for me, it's like this little spire off to the left side with those, teals and yellows and blues, and also those brown spots off on the sides, which you'll see how I incorporated those in my image. But you really start to notice things the more time you spend in an image. But obviously something that's really special about Rex Ray's work, and something that immediately captivated me, was his use of color. And looking at this image, we've got a lot of colors going on, but primarily, and where I knew I needed to start, was with the background. And so looking at the background of this image, well, it's kind of that, warmer toned green. And despite having so many surfaces and backgrounds in my collection, I didn't have one that was that color, so I had to make one. So I used my DIY background solution, which if you've not seen that video, I'll link it down below, but just applied the joint compound to the background and then painted it with a combination of greens and yellows, really wanting to get those warmer tones in there, but also kind of keeping it a certain amount of restrained and muted, because we really want those cherries, those reds, those yellows to pop. But now as the creative process works, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, is like you start to think about an idea, right? Like I know I'm going to do this Rex Ray photo shoot and I'm working on this background and I've got this concept of summer fruits, but I don't totally know exactly like what I'm going to do with it. And so you always kind of let those ideas just sort of marinate in the back of your mind, right? Like the subconscious is always going when it comes to creativity. And so then it was was about a week ago that I had my family over to celebrate my dad's retirement, and as per usual, I did an epic appetizer spread. Like, I love to go all out when it comes to appetizers, and especially like a really good cheese board, a nosh board, and of course, what did I buy in order to put on that nosh board? Well, I went for those summer fruits. I got the cherries, I got the raspberries, I got all of those delicious summer things, and suddenly I thought, oh, this would be the perfect thing to do then for that Rex-Ray photo shoot, especially too because looking at this composition, there's so many different elements, right? Like, we can't just have like one single hero dish if we're really going to mimic this image. And so knowing I need lots of little plates, lots of little details, lots of little circles and things, and I thought, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a cheese plate, kind of like snacking spread. So now that those ideas were really becoming more clear, and then I also had a background, now it was time to start to play with props as well as the lighting. So in terms of props, again, kind of going back to this image, I knew that most of the reds and the oranges and yellows would come from the food itself. And so pulling props that were more in the family of the lighter blues, the turquoises, also pulling in some browns because those bigger brown spots. So that's how I ended up pulling out these bigger brown bowls, which I thought could serve as really nice anchors because I really did want to mimic this composition on every level possible because I knew it would really push me outside of my comfort zone and do things that I don't usually do. I mean, let's be honest, I would have never thought like green background, blue props, brown props, oh, that'll work really well, right? Like, I would not have necessarily thought of that had I not been inspired by this image. And what was really cool is that some of my lesser used props ended up getting used in this shot, namely 2 plates that have been sitting in my collection for a long time, like I'd say multiple years now, and really not getting much airtime. And I looked at them and I realized, oh, they have these really beautiful like circular patterns, which are definitely a recurring theme across all of Rex-Ray's work, are all these patterns and circles and dots and things like that. And so these plates really reminded me of his work. And so they luckily really worked out too with the color palette. And 2, this anthropology plate in specific really reminded me of that lighter blue area at the bottom of the frame in Rex-Ray's image. And so I thought, perfect, that's really gonna help to anchor the composition. As I was planning out the props, I was also testing the lighting with all these test shots. And as I thought about the lighting, you know, and thinking about Rex-Ray's work, it's all a lot of collage, it's 2-dimensional. If you learn more about his background as a graphic designer and really how that informs his aesthetics, but that there's this really graphic nature and that it's very 2-dimensional in a lot of ways, right? That this is not a photorealistic, like from the sense of depth and things like that. Obviously, depth and contrast are created because of his unique application of colors and shapes and lines, but I wanted sort of that flatter feeling. And so to me, flatter lighting, you know, there's a lot of different ways this could be interpreted, but the way that I interpreted it was going with super soft lighting. And so what do we know about super soft light? Well, we need a really large light source. So if you're working in natural, that could be a really large window with indirect light coming in. For me, I'm working with artificial light today, working with my strobe. So I ended up going for my behemoth of a softbox, which is 6 feet by 4.5 feet. It's gigantic. It's unnecessary. Most folks don't need this. You could actually accomplish this probably a little bit easier with a scrim, but you know, if you got it, flaunt it, have fun with it. And so adding that softbox to the equation created super duper soft lighting for me. Now, one note about this softbox is you will need a strobe in order to fully fill it. So don't try to just do this with one speed light in something this massive. 2, you need room. This thing, when it showed up, I was like, this is embarrassing. But so then when it came to the actual shoot, I really played around with the composition a whole lot. And fortunately, because of the subject matter, you know, we've got these cheeses and these fruits and these crackers, things like that, like they're gonna sit just fine. They're not gonna change on us. Just a little spritz there on the apricots to make sure they got a little extra shine right before I took the final shot. But otherwise, I had a lot of fun just playing around and rearranging things, but really trying to stay as true as possible to his composition in terms of working, you know, having those 2 browns there on the either side, having that blue plate down at the bottom, having a brown plate and then a blue plate up at the top and kind of offset to one another. And in terms of the napkin, Lord knows we all need more inspiration in the napkin department. I was actually inspired inspired by the like kind of little flame coming up. That's what it kind of looks like to me, that little flame coming up from the bottom of the frame next to the blue plate. And I thought, oh, we could throw a golden napkin down in there and kind of even that little bit of a shape so that it's pushing upward next to that blue plate. And I just really like the way that the napkin ended up in this shot. But what was neat was that this really pushed me outside my comfort zone too in terms of composition. That so often from a composition standpoint, you know, my work, I usually just really zero in on the hero, that I really fill the frame with the main dish. I don't really do these bigger scenes where we have all these different elements going on. And two, you know, leaving a lot of open space in the center, that the bigger parts of this composition where the eye and the subjects are mainly positioned are there along the bottom and along the top. So this was also something that made me think about line and shape differently than how I usually approach it. And as far as the colors, I mean, this is really, to me, breaking a lot of what are traditionally set forth as the rules of color theory, right? Like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, you know, don't put too many colors in the composition. It's going to confuse the viewer. It's not going to look balanced. It's going to be too much. Well, I'm here to be too much. But two, I mean, you look at this, we've got red, orange, yellow, green, blue, not really any purples, but still like such a combination of different colors, but yet it works. And I credit that absolutely to being inspired by this artwork. And so if you feel like you're in a color rut, or if you're scared to experiment with color, go find some artists whose work that you're like, oh, I really love their use of color, and how can I bring that into my food photography and inspire some choices that maybe you wouldn't make otherwise. So once I was happy with the shot, then it was a matter of just making those final editing tweaks. And again, I did things that I don't typically do. First thing being that from the saturation standpoint, you know, a lot of times I will sort of rein in the saturation, really wanting my food photos to feel real and true to life. But, you know, looking at Rex Ray's work, like these are bold colors, a use of saturation. So I really let that fly, let that come through in fully saturated colors. But then too, I adjusted some individual hues. So for example, the greens, a lot of times in editing, I'll add just a little blue to the green, like take that slider towards the blues just a little bit to make the greens, like the green parsley or the green garnish or the green salad, feel a little like fresher, a little less yellow. But in this case, I wanted the greens to be more yellow because that was that original image. So taking that green slider and just sliding it a little bit more toward the yellow end of the spectrum. And then looking at the blues, the way that they were captured on the camera, it looked a little too purpley blue. I wanted it more of a green blue, so taking that and skewing it a little bit to the left in terms of that HSL slider. However, not wanting to take it too far because I still had the blueberries in the scene and I really wanted those to kind of stay and looking like they were real blueberries and not, you know, some sort of like alien blueberries. Now, we could have used local adjustments, but, you know, just thinking about the global overall look of it, that I was happy with just a slight skew towards the greens on the blue scale. Now, funny story, going back to kind of where we started, when I got inspired by the work of Rex Ray and really wanted to dig into it, I bought the book, right? So I could really dig into his artwork. Well, I accidentally hit 2 on checkout, so I ended up with an extra copy. So I thought, what better way to celebrate the work of Rex Ray and feeling inspired than to do a giveaway of this book as well as a copy of my book, and it's going to be a signed copy from yours truly. So if you want to enter that giveaway for the Rex Ray book and my book, Picture Perfect Food, I will link that down below. But as always, thank you so much for stopping by here in the studio. It's always a treat to get to hang out. I hope you stay out of trouble, and I'll see you soon, all right? Bye! Now, these are obviously very